session. For those of you who may not be familiar with ARC facilities, here's a little bit of information about us. And now I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker. David Trask is our National Director at ARC Facilities. He's also the host of the Facility Voices podcast. David's a keynote speaker. He's a thought leader in the facility management space. He helps facilities teams across the U.S. leverage technology for efficiency. He's an advocate for effective succession planning to minimize the impact of retirement, and a strong supporter of trades careers. David regularly shares best practices from the field and through conversations with his guests on the podcast through his LinkedIn page and other channels. So David, I want to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Indira, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I'd like to get started with a poll question, and this is really to understand who you are. So the question is, are your hurricane plans, supply locations, emergency contacts, and checklists available and editable on mobile devices? So can your team access this stuff? Does everybody know where stuff is located? So just go ahead and make your selection, then we'll share the results with who else is on the line. We'll give it another minute here. I appreciate all of you participating. All right, Indira, why don't we go ahead and share some results? Oh, we've got about 50% of you said no. Others said not sure, about 21%. And 25% of you are ahead of the curve. I like that. It's interesting because a lot of folks that I've talked to over the last 10 years at least are kind of all over the board. Is my stuff current? Is it accessible by everybody? And I think this kind of underlines the problems that a lot of folks run into when a hurricane or a big storm does happen, is accessing that information. And again, we don't have time when it's a hurricane. You know, you're planning in advance, and we're going to jump into that. But what I really want to start by sharing is a lot of the stuff that I was able to do over the last couple of months was I did a road show. So essentially, I went to multiple locations all over the state of Florida, to different organizations. I was at an energy provider, so public utility. I was at a county. I was at a higher ed education institution. I went to a hospital, and I also went to a Native American tribe and really interviewed them and tried to figure out, what are they doing? What's worked? What didn't work? What are some of those best practices that they've uncovered that they've put in place moving forward? And a lot of that I'm going to share today. And it was so great to hear from these people because, again, you in Florida here, and I live in Florida, so I live and breathe this. I actually just tested my hurricane kits and my hurricane supplies and tested my generator last weekend. But again, this is what we live and breathe in Florida, but it impacts organizations all over the country because a hurricane doesn't just hit one state, one area. It goes all over the place. But what we're going to talk about here is the purpose for that trip was, again, to really understand, hear what they're doing, see what they're doing. They shared exactly where their stuff was located. Also, those organizations, like I mentioned, it was all different verticals. So everybody did things a little bit differently. But the key learnings that I was able to uncover was pre-storm planning and prep. Also, real-time response during those hurricanes, but also that post-storm recovery and assessment, and then how they adjust those things on the fly throughout the season, but also how they evaluate everything post-season and then leading up to next season. So we're going to jump right in here. And again, me being from Florida, I've been through this and I've rode through multiple storms, multiple hurricanes, tropical storm, tropical waves, name it, and we see it here. But one thing I've learned and is when you see Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel land on your beach and he's filming from your beach, you might want to think that about leaving or listen, it's real. He goes where the storms are. But what that means is it's going to impact those areas. And he shows up and they start filming from those impacted areas or those areas that are predicted to be impacted. But that picture in the upper left-hand corner is meant to make you laugh, but the models can go all over the place. I mean, there's a hurricane that just went into the Gulf, hit some of the South American countries. And then they thought it was going to hit a little bit further west than it did. And it turned up and went up and went up into the Houston area. And God bless those people that were impacted by that, because I've lived through them too. And it can be incredibly brutal. But what that also happened at that storm is over 1 million people were out of power immediately, and that number climbed to multiple millions as it moved along. But these are some of those hurricane model things that you see. But a hurricane, it can impact, like I said, multiple states, multiple areas, because that path, it doesn't just hit land and just dissolve. It hits land and keeps going. So by the time it hits the state of Florida and it goes up into Georgia, Alabama, or even goes over to Texas, it's still a tropical storm. You're talking 50, 60, 70-mile-an-hour winds that are sustained. Okay, it can do a ton of damage. That picture in the upper right-hand corner there, that's from the storm that Hurricane Ian, those are cars underwater. That was a Cat 4 that came across. Those pictures of that gentleman there, that's Jim Cantori. He's there, right? So he goes where they are, but more importantly, it doesn't take long for these things to really cause catastrophic damage. But these are some of those hurricane supplies that I have at my house. I've got candles, I've got water, I've got a generator that powers my house. But keep in mind, even if you have that generator or you've got those flashlights, none of them work unless you've got batteries or gas. Well, what happens when you lose power? So do the gas stations. So it's really important to pre-prep and make sure that you've got all of that stuff, but also that your family is safe and they know where this stuff is located. Right. I'm in Florida, like I mentioned. Last night we had a power outage just for an hour last night, and we were grabbing all of our flashlights and lanterns just to make sure that they were accessible quickly. Right. So make sure that your family knows where that stuff is too. But I've lived through this stuff. But that storm damage, the last big storm that I had that hit my area, I lived just north of Orlando. It dropped a tree right on my roof. That background image that you see, there's the tree. The whole top of the tree snapped off and landed on my roof. Thank goodness my neighbor is a roofer. He came over and patched it for me. But also my house is on a slant, right? So, or my driveway's on a slant. I was getting water that was running into my garage. That's a sump pump that you see there with all those sandbags. And again, it doesn't take long for this to impact you. My pool at my house, it raised 6 inches of water in my pool. It was dropping sump pumps in there too. But again, you live and breathe this stuff in those hurricane prone areas. But some of those hurricane, obviously, they impact your community. These pictures are ones that I took. This is just from my neighborhood. All right. The upper left-hand corner, you see that power line? Yeah, we lost power for 3 weeks. All right. That damage to the second picture from the left there, that sheet metal that you see there, that was the guy, that house right there. That's my neighbor just down the street. That's his pool screen. All right. We don't know that there was a hurricane, or I'm sorry, a tornado, but I'm trying to figure out how else did that stuff get on the front of his house, from the back of his house. So again, trees go down, power, fences go down. It doesn't take long for things to go sideways when a hurricane hits, but also boil water mandates are a big thing too. If you lose power to your house, or you lose power to those millions of people that are in Texas that lost power too, that means a lot of those treatment plants are down. So they put you on a boiled water mandate. So again, it's 90-degree heat too. Again, it can really impact the community. So part of what I learned is with the hurricane plans is, do you even have one? And who knows what that plan is? So again, hurricane preparedness and preparation really starts in December of the previous year, because again, it goes from June till September-ish every year. But again, it's what is involved in your plan. What are the intricacies of your plan, and who has access to that information? And also, more importantly, how often are you drilling that? How often are you updating that? And who's able to access that information? So again, you can see some of the quotes here from some of the people that I met with. But again, it's also what happens with leadership. All right. When you have an incident that's going on, who's running the show? Who's steering the ship? It's that chain of command. Is that established within your organization? And one of the quotes here that I love is the emergency management is the top dog. All right. When you're preparing for a hurricane and you know it's coming and you've launched your emergency action plan and your EOC's launched. All right, your incident command is launched. Everything is going, and it's coming. All right, Jim Cantori's in your neighborhood. All right, what do? Well, emergency command's in charge. You got to run it. And what's that chain of command? Make sure that that is absolutely identified and everybody knows what they're supposed to do, but also coordinating with government agencies. Coordinate with you if you're a public entity, if you're a university, if you're any kind of a school, your municipality, whatever. Communicate with those orgs that are also adjacent to you, but also outside of your area. One org that I spoke with is a university, and they communicate and work mutual aid plans with 100 universities across the country. 100. Right? When something goes sideways, they have people to help them. They also have those county, those city, those state agencies. They have mutual aid agreements with these different organizations. But I heard the same thing from the public utility that I met with. They've got mutual aid agreements with other utilities outside of their state. They also coordinate directly with federal. All right. So the different departments should have those communications channels, really participate in those planning meetings. But again, when you activate your EOC, it's game on. All right. You've got to work hand in hand with those state, those county, those local municipalities, as well as federal. All right. To make sure that everybody is able to support each other. Working with FEMA, establish that communication with FEMA. Designate who's your FEMA contact. Use those communication platforms with FEMA. Emergency plans, align and make sure that you're aligning with FEMA's suggested things as well. Training exercises, you got to plan. You got to train. You don't want this to be a last minute. What am I supposed to do? Exercise. That won't work. All right. You're setting yourself up for failure. Participate in training programs, and FEMA offers these. All right. Resource coordination. Really pre-position those resources with FEMA, access those FEMA disaster resources, get those grants, apply for FEMA grants, use funds for resilience projects, right? Also, sharing that information real time, sharing your protocols with FEMA and with those other agencies is a big deal. Again, those mutual aid agreements with those local organizations, those city, county, state, and federal agencies. That post-disaster recovery, what's your plan? And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. And also apply for those recovery assistance from FEMA. So there's also what's called hurricane spotter certifications. I learned this from a couple of our different organizations that I met with. And what it is it's essentially a specialized training program that equips individuals within your organization to identify, report, and respond to those hurricane conditions. It includes weather observations. One of the orgs was a healthcare org that I talked to. They've got 3 or 4 people on their team that have that spotter certification. They go on the roof. All right. They're watching. Because in a hurricane, you can almost see a wall. All right. I've been through these and I can see the wall. It's almost like a movie. It's a black wall or dark gray wall of clouds, and you can see where it's coming. And you can also see the direction that it's spinning. All right. Whenever I see clouds spinning, I think tornadoes. All right. And that is often kicked up by a hurricane. But these people are specialized with safety protocols. reporting procedures, equipment use, communication skills, hurricane dynamics, and also emergency response. It's a great certification. And Skywarn Spotter is that certification. If you can get some of your team, or you want some of your team to look into that certification. But also coordinating with vendors. All right. I actually met with multiple vendors, including, well, Granger's one, on how they coordinate with a lot of their organizations to to facilitate their supply needs during hurricanes. All right. That's also power. Think about your suppliers with regards to fuel, diesel for your generators. Also, the flood management. Do you have pumps? Waterproofing services. These are all vendors, construction, debris removal, communication, security, all of these, even food and beverage. All right. What are you going to do when all of your food is spoiled in your facility? You've got a kitchen, all the food's bad, right? Also medical supplies, portable facilities, restrooms, shelters, and also those transportation and logistics. All right, now let me kind of define one thing that I heard from the public utility that I thought was amazing. They have mutual agreements with multiple parking lots. Okay, and it sounds a little funny, but parking lots. The reason they have mutual aid agreements for parking lots is those are staging areas. And they have those scattered all over the county, but staging areas for those third-party vendors, those tree removal companies that come in. I've been here through, like I said, multiple hurricanes, multiple tropical storms and depressions. And there's nothing better than seeing that line of trucks that's coming from out of state, and all these people are tree removal orgs, huge boom trucks, massive trucks with the chippers on trailers behind them. All right, that is amazing. Where are they going to park? That's what he aligns, is all those parking areas, but he also works out mutual aid agreements and things with hotels. So he has agreements with specific hotels that are adjacent to these parking lots. Now, keep in mind, these parking lots might be public, they might be privately owned, but they work on these agreements way in advance so that those third-party orgs that are coming in have places to stay, also places to stage. And that even includes bathrooms. So again, think about it outside that box there that, well, what does that mean? I'm just going to get them in. Well, where are they going to go to the restroom? They even pull in those different porta potties, portalets to be in those staging areas. But all of that is coordinated with vendors. Thought that was fantastic. Communication is a big one. All right. So there's all different ways that we can communicate. You may have a mass notification system. It could be automatic texting, social media. That's a big one. Posting updates real time to your team. Also text alerts to your team. Having alerts pop up on people's computers. Having alerts go over loudspeakers, whatever it is. But communication is the big deal. Now, hurricanes don't just pop up tomorrow. All right. We know that they're coming. Right. But again, communication is a huge component of that, making sure that everybody's on the same page real time. Everybody knows. Well, that's a mix of radios, cell phones. Everybody's got a cell phone. All right. So how are you able to communicate with you and your team? Now, I'm gonna use this example because I used to live up in the Pacific Northwest, and my wife and I used to go to this concert every year that was in this really, really small town. Well, really small town means limited cell service, only so many towers, right? Well, the town has 9,000 people in it regularly. Well, for this concert, it's the base of the Cascade Mountain Range. For 3 days, there's about 70,000 people show up to this small town. What that means is that bandwidth for all those cell towers shrinks to this small. Okay. So you go from having 5 bars, 4 bars to maybe you have one. So again, think about those types of things wherever you are. The more people who can't call somebody, they have no cell service, they have no Wi-Fi in their house, all of that's pulling from those towers now. Also, using mass notification systems, again, it's sending alerts out to the broad audience. Now, some cities, some counties, some states have mass alert systems too. I get them in Florida, but sometimes you have to sign up for those. So you want to make sure that your team is alerted to those things, not just from your team, but also from the state too. Because again, this isn't just about your sites, your facilities. This is their well-being for their families as well and their homes. So also ensure that staff members have official weather spotting certifications. I mentioned this before. That's a big one. I thought that was just fantastic. And I would highly recommend that you have a few of your team members get that certification. But there's also this communication here that I mentioned. You've got your radios, you've got a cell phone, but also sat phones, right? Most of the people that I met with had suitcases, the little suitcases with sat phones, multiples of them. Those are your incident command people, your people out in the field. If a hurricane comes through here, there's nothing guaranteeing that cell phone tower is going to be standing. It may be on the ground. And again, if it knocks it out, you have no cell service, right? Think about worst case scenario here. Well, that's where sat phones come in too. But again, radios and cell phones are always a big one. So let's talk about emergency equipment and supplies. All right. This is what they really shared a lot of this information. A lot of the photos you're about to see are some that I took from the different sites. So it starts with power. One thing that happens in it just happened with Beryl, that storm that just hit Texas, is knocked out power to millions of people. Well, what's your backup? I have a generator at my house, thank goodness. All right. It'll power my entire house. All right. But can you power your facilities? And what's the impact on that? You have generators. How many generators do you have? How often are you testing those generators? What's your procedure? Right? Who knows what's the fire up procedure for that generator? Well, if you say one person, what if that person can't get in? What if they can't make it in because there's damage to their house? I got news for you. They're staying home. If there's damage that's going to impact their family, they're staying home, as they should. So that means you can't rely on one person. Multiple people need to know those procedures and document those procedures so that everybody can access it on their cell phone. And I'm going to drive that point home. Access it on their cell phone, but also offline. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But also think about it from the generator perspective. How much fuel do you have on hand? I heard 96 hours. That's kind of the go-to standard that I heard. But also, what's your agreement to get additional fuel when that runs out? So think about that, right? Those trucks, and again, I've waited in line in Florida when you couldn't get gas. Gas is a premium, where it was like the 70s with the gas lines. I mean, 20 cars deep, 30 cars deep, waiting to get gas. And they're waiting there, and the gas station's already out of gas, but someone heard that there's a truck coming in. So again, it's that communication of when gas is going to be available. And a lot of that's on your radios, on TV broadcasts as well. They'll say who's going to have gas and what's the plan with those gas providers too. And that's regular gas and also diesel, of course. So sandbags, all right. How long do they last? I didn't even know this. All right. When the last storm came through, I had to go 3 times to my county park, which was up the road from me, and get sandbags. Right. Because remember, I showed earlier, water was running into my garage. Now I had some barriers up, but again, it still was running into my garage. I didn't have sandbags. So I went to the county park and got sandbags. Well, I didn't have enough. So I had to make 4 trips back and forth. I don't have a truck. I was backing these things in my trunk of my car, right? But also, I didn't know that these sandbags, the ones that you see on the screen here, they start to deteriorate after a year. No idea. These are on a pallet next to my house, right? So I'm already thinking if I lift those up, they're going to just fall apart. The first one I lifted up just exploded in my hands. I'm already looking for where can I get more sandbags, all right? And I just basically reached out to my local county and they supplied me a list of where I could get sandbags, but also where can I get more? How many am I limited to? They limited me to 10 per trip, 10, right? They don't fill them for you. They have piles of sand. They give you 10 bags. They have the strings, 10 bags, and a shovel, right? The shovel's sticking in the sand. You fill them, you tie them, you bring them home, right? Well, that's the way most organizations, you don't have a pile of sand in your backyard, all right? You don't have a pile of sand on your parking lot. Where can you get more? So one of the hospitals I met with, they thought they had enough. They went out there, similar situation, bag disintegrated. They had a mutual aid agreement with a local company right up the road that supplied sand, not the bags, but sand. So they, in advance, they actually went out and bought a whole bunch of sandbags, and then they've got that agreement where they're palletizing. They've got a bunch of their guys gone out. They basically did it on a Saturday. They called in, paid a couple of guys some overtime, and went out there, filled these sandbags up, put them on pallets, covered them up, and now they've got some sandbags. They don't have enough, but they've got enough to cover those high prone areas for flooding. Water barriers, right? A lot of different kinds. There's walls, there's the big bladder systems. That picture of the driveway there, that's mine, right? Right after the hurricane. But then there's also the ones now that they're water activated, all right? Not saying good or bad, I don't know. I had a couple of these, they worked all right, but the sandbags worked great for me. Those bladder systems are great. From everything that I've seen, and I've seen videos on these, the communication I got back from a lot of the people I met with are using these too. They're filled with water, and you can also, you can empty them out and reuse them over and over and over again. And they come in all different sizes. So again, water activated, bladder system, walls, also sandbags. So where are those for your org? Do you even have any of those? And if you don't, you need to start thinking about that, especially if you're in those flood prone areas. Hurricane kits, these are photos that I took. A couple of these things that I wanted to point out here. There's big, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that's where they keep all of their supplies in this giant room. All right. And that's one of the healthcare orgs that I met with. But the upper right corner there, that's what I thought was interesting. So they have in their hurricane boxes, or huge boxes, are padlocked. On the outside, it has that list that you see in the bottom left-hand corner. It's what's in there. But in the upper right there, when they opened up that kit, there's a metal case clipboard in there, but most importantly to me, keys. All their sites, for all their sites, those are keys to their entire campus, all of them. All right. Everybody who could get access to this particular thing, again, it's padlocked, so it's in a secure area, but those are the keys to the building. Right. You wouldn't think that that's such a big deal for facilities, but I guarantee you, not everybody in your facilities has a key to every single room. I oftentimes, when I do site walks, I have to go to security to get a key to an IT closet or something like that. Or they'll go open the closet for me. These are keys to everything. All right. Even your outbuildings, they've got all of that stuff all in, it's all organized. But again, you can see all the different things here, that these are just some of the photos that I was able to take when they were showing me all those different things. But also planning items here. Think about your team. So you've launched your EOC. There's people who are going to be coming on site. They're coming on site for multiple days. Plan on them being there and bringing extra clothes for a few days. Also, what's your plan for when they've got to stay? Where are they going to sleep? All right. This was an interesting one too. Again, bathrooms, showers. Are you, or do you have designated shower areas in your building? This was a little bit of a gap that I was able to uncover, that they said, we didn't realize until after the last storm that, no one knew where to go take a shower. So they actually have dedicated floors, and this is a hospital. They have dedicated showers in each floor for male and female personnel to take showers, right? And they all know where to go. But again, it can be a free for all, or there's a guessing game. Where do I go? All right. Also, you can import in additional showers. You can have trailers of showers brought in too. So, but again, all that sleeping information, all that sleeping bags, all their pillows, all that stuff. Are you supplying that, or is your team? But also all those clothes for multiple days, additional boots, additional shoes, whatever they need to last for a few days. Because again, they may be there during the storm, but they're also going to be there after the storm. So emergency supplies, again, disaster supply rooms. Where is that stuff? Right? But what's included in that also is think about water, right? One of the orgs that I met with was telling me that they have pallets and pallets of water, right? And water has to be stored in a certain way and in certain climate conditions, all right? And it also, much of the bottled water that you have has an expiration date on that. So what they uncovered is they had all this extra water, all this water set on pallets, and it was going bad, right? So they had to restock. They had to dump all this water. But check those expiration dates, all right? Check to make sure that it's stored in a climate controlled area, not just out in a hot warehouse someplace, because that water can turn. Even though it's got an expiration date on it, it doesn't mean it's going to last that long. And the way they knew that this water had gone bad, it hadn't expired. Not all of it had expired, some of it had. But more importantly, the water was yellow on those pallets. It was in a hot warehouse. It is what it is. But you got to rotate that stuff, rotate that out in the field, distribute that to the field, also restock. But also, I found this too. These pictures in the upper center there and also the bottom right, there's 50-year water. What's the difference between the 50-year water and that stuff in the middle? Cans, right? 50-year water. This stuff isn't plastic. It's not in plastic containers. And I thought this was interesting. It's guaranteed for 50 years. Again, climate controlled, but 50 years, not just a few years or 5 years, right? 50 years. That's a big deal. The other thing is too, what's your plan for food for your staff? All right. Your staff is coming in, but who's going to feed them? Are they supposed to bring their own stuff? Right? What's that communication plan and that food plan for your staff? You're requiring them to come in. Do you have a kitchen? Do you have a full cafeteria? Is it going to be open and ready for them? Do you also have MREs, meals ready to eat? One org that I met with had just a ton of MREs. I mean, millions of dollars in MREs for their facilities and for their people at their sites, right? And one of the big things that they realize is MREs, again, have to be stored in certain conditions. They're guaranteed for X amount of years stored under these conditions. Well, some of them are starting to go bad or coming up on a go bad date. Well, what they did, and this is I thought was phenomenal. They actually, for the storms that happened, or I'm sorry, the fires that happened over in Hawaii on Maui a few years ago or a year or so ago, they actually donated all of those MREs to all those families that were over on the island. That's amazing, right? But again, they did that also because it helped for them to be able to use that or somebody to be able to use that because those expiration dates were coming up, right? It went from 15 years, 20 years, whatever the expiration date is on those MREs to it's half that. So they were able to make sure that someone could utilize that food before it did go bad. And again, those families, God bless them for what they went through, but they were able to get some of these food items as well. Think about this, ice, right? And I say this jokingly, okay, but water out of your tap still works before the storms here, all right? There's always a rush to the grocery store, to these portable ice, or these ice dedicated ice machines that are out. Again, I live in Florida. Everybody rushes out to get ice because when you lose power, that means your refrigerator loses power, your freezer loses power. Well, in what I do, and that picture in the bottom left is what we do, is fill Ziploc bags, freezer bags, about half full with water, put them in your freezer well in advance of the storm getting here. God forbid you lose power. And I have a generator, but it takes me a little bit to get it up and plugged in and wired and running and everything. But your freezer's still working. Freeze your own ice because when it melts, you've also got that for water as well, if you need it. Write out supplies and emergency kits. This is just a list of a whole bunch of different things that I was told that were included in their list. This is going to be a little bit different for what you are. Maybe it's based off your region. But again, this is a good start, right? We'll share some of this information out with you after the presentation here too. But this is a kind of a laundry list of a lot of those different things that I was told, and they shared, and they really opened their arms and shared a lot of this information with me. But these are some of the key things for you to think about in your facilities for those ride out supplies, and that's the supplies that your team takes out in the field when they're going and checking on your buildings, but also those emergency kits that you've got in your facilities. But here's the underlying other challenge that I kept hearing is, yeah, we've got emergency kits, we've got emergency supplies, we've got maybe a spreadsheet that shows what it is in our supply list. But the one thing that I kept hearing over and over again is, where are they? Where are they? Where do they move? You know, these are usually stored in kind of a closet someplace, or they're stored in the corner of a mechanical room, or they're stored, you know, over there or wherever. But here's the challenge too, is when somebody needs that space, they also move it. So how are you tracking and mapping out where is this stuff? And does everybody know where this stuff is? Not just where is it, what is it? So think about, you know, you pull your phone out of your pocket and you got a floor plan. It shows these three dots. Okay. What do those say? Emergency kits. Okay. So if I click on one of those, here's the stuff, photos of what's in that kit, right? This is the stuff that's in that left-hand side, upper left-hand side kit, that dot. But it says, you can see photos of what's in that kit. You can have checklists in here. You could have, you know, inspections. You could have how many batteries are in there, all from your phone, right? Offline. Lose power, you lose cell service, you can still open it up and find what it is, where it is, and what kind of quantities it is. If that's not the one you're looking for, click on the other one, boom, there it is. Building to building, site to site. Even on a site plan, you could map out where all of your staging areas are. Okay. You could have your vendor lists in there. Who are the different agencies? What's my emergency contacts? All of the information associated with what do I do to find this stuff? What's in that area? If I need something, I need it now. All right. I'm trying to respond. Everything is completely transparent, and every single person on your team can access it by what's in their pocket right now, their cell phone. They can access it from their desktop computer. They can access it from their iPad. Doesn't matter where they are. They can be at home and access this stuff. But where everything is, and if you move it, you can move that dot and move it to the next room or the next room. And as soon as you hit save, everybody sees where it moved to, right? Cannot tell you how many times I heard it on this trip where I was, again, visiting all these sites. It's, oh, I think the stuff's over here. Oh, wait a minute. No, the tarps are in the other building over here. And oh, no, wait a minute. I have a first aid kit over here. Oh, wait a minute. We go in that room and it's not there. It moved, right? Stuff gets tucked away in these little areas. But that's the stuff you need when a hurricane happens. That's the stuff you need when stuff goes sideways, right? You got to make sure that you know where this stuff is and you can access those locations, and that's mapping it out. And this is what we do. We map out where that stuff is and provide that service. But again, you got to map that stuff out so everybody knows where that stuff is. So let's talk about planning here. How far in advance do you start, you know, kicking everything in? It's at 72. I always say it's 72, 48, 24. All right. 72 is what I kept hearing is 72 hours. You understand it's heading this way. You activate your EOC. All right. You start securing your facilities, staff coordination. Everybody should know what their job is, what they're supposed to do. Communication, communication, communication. I'm going to say it over and over again. Communicate and coordinate with your team so everybody knows what they're supposed to do. 48 hours. Okay. Now the clock's sped up. Okay. You're starting to evacuate your people if necessary. All right. You want to make sure that everybody is safe. Everybody knows where they're supposed to go. You got to start prepping and getting that stuff going and making that plan. It's that final prep, right? It's coming. You know, the weather, Jim Cantori's standing on the beach right next to you. Jim Cantori's standing in your town city center. All right. That means it's real. It's coming. But again, that communication system, again, verify all of that's working, verify you can reach all those people and make sure that everybody is safe and knows what they're supposed to do. 24 hours. All right. Now it's here. All right. If you're starting your planning in 24 hours before a storm comes, you're too late. Food's gone off the shelves. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a grocery store and the shelves are bare because everybody's freaking out. You know, they can't get water. It's all sold out. They can't get toiletries. They can't get bread. They can't get milk. All right. If you're waiting until 24 hours before a storm, you're too late. All right. So again, start those preps, get it going, securing your facility, get everybody sheltered, really work on the interior preparations too. All right. Where's everybody going to go if it comes and the roof starts to lift off? Right. If you're in the building still, where's those secure areas that your team's supposed to huddle? What's that plan? Also, that communication coordination. Again, communication, communication, communication. But those final checks and then hunker down. All right. It's coming. So during the storm, shelter. You got to be safe. Don't go outside. Don't go, don't be that guy or that gal who's standing in the driveway watching it happen, standing out in the parking lot watching it happen. Debris. I've seen storms in Florida where 2x4s are sticking through a palm tree. That's the impact. Stuff's flying all over the place. Shelter. Get inside. And also, what's your emergency response to activate that power? What's your emergency response to let everybody know, what's going on, giving them the status updates, right? Again, during the storm, hunker down. Post-storm recovery, what do you do next? Okay, you got to do a damage assessment. But I always say, even before you do that, find out. And that last one down there, the staff support, to me is one of the biggest ones. How's your team? How are your people, right? Your buildings are they may be damaged, but how are your people? All right. Check on your people. Make sure your people are good. Make sure that they're okay. All right. Then work on your damage assessment. You got to figure out where you at. What damage was done to the buildings? What's your plan? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But also those restoration services, cleaning up, making sure everything is up and running and getting it up and back up and running as fast as you can. This I thought was fantastic. All right. One of the orgs that I met with the municipality, they add their post-storm site inspections include these sheets: red, yellow, green. Red means don't go in. Too much damage to this building. These are stickers. They're 8.5 by 11 stickers. They stick them on the door of the building or on the front of the building. So driving by that has been inspected. That building is their building, right? Has been inspected, and this is a status of that building. I thought this was genius, right? Every person that I met with, right? This is the first org I met with. Every org that I met with after that, I showed them this. They all wanted copies of this. This is amazing. You drive by your building, you go to inspect your building, right? And you can't remember, did I inspect this one or not? You drive by, you see this thing stuck on the door, right? Go on to the next building and the next building. But this is how they were able to do that. And it was so effective, right? But also conducting those damage assessments means you gotta have a checklist. Identify those things that are important to you. And people go around and they fill out that checklist. Remember that clipboard that I showed you that was in that emergency box earlier? These are what's in there with the pens, with the keys. They're actually able to document this. These are paper copies, but you can also do this digitally with editable forms, all in what I showed you earlier. Our system, I can only speak for our system, supports editable forms. You don't even have to have a piece of paper, right? You can fill this out, just check boxes. You can voice in even instead of typing. Hey, the roof has got some damage on the southeast corner. Hit save. Everybody sees it. But again, now you have that running, knowing you can even take pictures and attach it to this form in our system anyway. And you can see exactly what that damage is, and it's attached to that form. And then you save it, and it can even email a copy of that off. but it also can save it to the building too. So you see exactly what's going on with that building. They can take multiple pictures, they can put notes on the pictures, everything. And now they've got a clear record of what's going on in that building. They don't have to get in the car and drive back over there. They can open it up and go, oh, okay, this building needs this. Let me click on the next building. This building needs that. All right. Real time in the field. The other thing is debris removal. This is, are you doing it in-house? Do you have vendors? And also, where's the location where you're supposed to get rid of all this stuff? We had out on the roads all over the place when trees were oak trees and all the different palm trees and everything were on the ground from all those storms and those photos I showed you before. Piles, mounds. Well, it took weeks and weeks for the debris services to come through the neighborhoods, and the same thing with a lot of your sites. They're going to come through and they've got these big claws that put them in the back of trucks and haul them off. But again, are you planning on doing that? Do you have the supplies? Do you have gas, oil for the chainsaws? Do you have pole saws? Where is that stuff located too? And what's the team? Do you have chaps? Think about that. All the stuff associated, chaps for the chainsaw. So if the chain comes off, it hits the chaps, not their legs. Are they trained on this equipment? All of that can be identified where it is. You can even have videos showing them how to do that. Simple. Water finds a way. I say this all the time. All right. I was having a conversation earlier today, and I said one hurricane that I was actually on site at not even at my house. I was on site someplace, and the water or the rain was raining so hard and the wind was so hard, it was sideways, and water was going into the windowsill and into the window and up into the building. And it was old metal framed windows, right? Water finds a way. If you get 6 inches, 4 inches, 3 inches of rain on your roof, water will find a way if there's any kind of hole in your roof, right? But what are you going to do to mitigate some of that damage too? Do you have water pumps? Do you have sump pumps? Do you have dryers? Where are those? In the upper right-hand corner, remember I said this stuff can be stored all over the place? That was stored in a corner of a mechanical room, right? It had moved 4 times. They didn't even know it was there. I found it when I was doing the site walk with them. Also, partnerships with third-party remediation orgs. Here's some tips for filing insurance claims. Review your policy, document that damage, mitigate further damage. It goes on and on here, but these are just some tips that I heard from multiple people that show exactly what you should do. And again, this is going to be a little bit different depending on you and your organization, but these are some good tips that they all supplied. The other thing is lessons learned, right? This was, I think, was amazing. All right, this is from one organization I met with, and they supplied this post-action plan, and these are adjustments that they identified as gaps in systems, right? Just gaps in their current processes, and they documented it. These are lessons learned from a previous storm. They changed that prior to the next storm coming through. But again, document all of those things and then make those necessary adjustments. These are good takeaways from you. You got to learn from each one of these storms. And this is a great example of they identified all these different things. 17 items they identified that they wanted to fix, and they've since fixed all these. Tips for updating emergency plans. You got to just update these on a regular basis. As you find deficiencies, update them. Really identify your after action plans and review those. Review those with your team or your eyes and ears. All right. Got to review it with your entire team. Evaluate your communication process and those protocols associated with even evacuations. Really identify that. Identify those gaps for backup power, training those teams. Also, what's the protocol for your leadership? All right. What's that chain of command? Identify all of that. Revise strategies to enhance infrastructure and conduct those drills. Training. And also establish processes to update those plans continuously. All right. I want to, before we wrap up with the Q&A here, I want to ask one more poll question here. So if you've been impacted by a hurricane or a tropical storm, were any of your buildings damaged in the last 10 years or beyond? Have you ever had damage to any of your buildings? It could be small or it could be bigger. What are some of those damages? Think about that. Was it water? You had leaks? Was it, you had a roof ripped off? You had window damage? You had trees that went through a building? I've had that happen years ago. I had a tree went into my living room. All right. The first storm, it was back-to-back storms in about a month. First storm, damage to my roof, put a tarp on it. Good. I'm standing on my roof watching that wall coming for the second storm. All right. Second storm dropped an oak tree that was about, oh my gosh, 2 feet thick, dropped it in my living room. All right. Let's look at those results. Interesting. 58% of you have had damage. About half haven't. Okay. Interesting. So I'd be really curious to see what was some of that damage and what did you do to mitigate it and how long those buildings were uninhabitable even. That's interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that. Indira, let's open it up to some questions.
Yes, thank you so much, David. Very informative, great field trip, so that you could share real world solutions and best practices for everybody. So I do want to share a comment here that we received. Sorry about that. Let me just get into the right place here. From David, in New Orleans after Katrina in 2005, truck stops were a natural docking location for incoming crews and trucks. This brought plentiful business to the truck stop and safety, cleanliness, and convenience to the visitors. So
I
I just
love
wanted
it.
to share that. Yeah.
I love that. That's fantastic. Dedicated parking for large trucks too. That's great.
Yeah. Here's a question I have here. I love the mapping of locations on the software. Can it still be accessed if cell towers go down and power is lost? There's no Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I can only speak for our system, but yes, our system is meant to work offline too. So, for instance, let me give you an example. Say you lose power and you've actually made updates. Okay, so you have no Wi-Fi, cell towers are down. You can make updates offline as well, and then when the power comes back on or your cell service comes back as restored, all those changes that you've made offline are then synced up to the cloud and available to everybody too.
Awesome. Great. I have a
Yeah.
couple of questions that are related, I think. So,
Okay.
so here, let me just ask them here. I'm interested in hearing more about the emergency supplies mapping. How does the process work? And
Yeah.
then I have someone who said, what is the name of the software used to mark the locations of the emergency supplies, as well as the checklist logs that you were talking about, David?
Yeah, that's our system. It's ARC Facility. So essentially, we're a mobile app, a mobile platform that we actually map out the locations of the equipment. We map out the all your emergency equipment. We also can do mechanical equipment, but for emergency equipment, it's all of the equipment associated with those kits, your fire extinguishers, your defibrillators, EpiPens, all of this stuff associated with emergency related stuff. Kits are part of that. So think about your go bags, those suitcases that you've got for your emergency kits, all your emergency supplies, sewer cleanouts, all of that stuff could be mapped out. And it's all available offline. And again, it's a mobile app. You can access it from a browser as well, but we're a mobile first. So we want everybody to be able to access it because let's face it, your team's in the field.
Great. Thank you, David. Another question I have here, I think the supplies thing is really hitting. Our supplies are stored all over the place and constantly being moved due to lack of space. How have other organizations kept track of that?
Yeah, I've showed that mapping. That's the big one. Um, and the easiest way for me to explain this, if you're drawing it on a piece of paper, how are you updating that or how are you able to update that when somebody moves it to the room next door? All right. You can't. Or you're scratching stuff out and you're doing this. Our system, you literally hold your button on or hold your finger on the pin, move it to the next room, hit save. Done. Everything moves with it. All the photos, all the equipment lists, all the editable forms, all of that moves with that individual thing.
Thanks, David. Another question I have here, where can I find vendors who manage emergency supply distribution?
Yeah. I think a lot of them, what I was told from most of them is a lot of the big manufacturer, I'm sorry, the big distribution organizations like a Granger or oh gosh, there were several other ones that they had mentioned. that Granger was the biggest one, that they will actually use Granger as essentially they are the distributor of all of their emergency supply, meaning the last minute stuff. So they'll have like some tarps or maybe it's some additional food or supplies or even batteries. They'll actually have it so that they'll alert them and then they'll distribute those out to their individual sites so they don't have to house them in a warehouse or whatever.
Great. And then I do have a question about, can we get a copy of the write out supplies checklist?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're happy to share that. What I love about that too is this came directly from your peers. All the people that I met with, this is a culmination of what they supplied us with what they're doing, and we basically compiled all that information. And again, it's going to vary for you, so don't look at this as a set in stone thing. You need to adjust this for your organization, but this is a really good baseline to start with.
Yeah, we'll include that in the follow-up email with the recording. The hurricane supply checklist. David showed some snapshots of 72, 48, and 24 hours. We actually put that list together based on David's conversations with your peers in the field. So we will include that in the follow-up email. And I think that's all I have right now, David.
Okay.
If there's questions we didn't get to, we'll make sure to reach out to you individually. We'll send you a note in regards to any questions that you may have. You're welcome to send any additional questions to us. You can contact David. You can see his information here. Follow David on LinkedIn. You can reach out to him. You can reach out to ARC Facilities if you like. I did put the link for requesting more information for ARC Facilities. We did have some questions. People want to see a little bit more about that supply mapping and the forms, David. So if anybody's interested, just go ahead and click on that link, fill out that form, and one of our team members will call you back. Anything else, David, you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm not naming who I met with, but I want to say a special thanks to all those that I met with throughout the state of Florida. They were so open and shared such great information. And honestly, at the end of the day, we're here to help. Whatever we can do to help you and your organization, don't hesitate to reach out. We really try to identify different gaps in systems and try to help you. So anything that we can do to help, and even if it's something we don't do, give us a call. We're happy to try to help and see how we might be able to guide you in making some better decisions or better preparations for those hurricanes.
Thank you, David. A very informative presentation, and thanks to our audience for taking the time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. Please look out for a follow-up email from ARC Facilities. And like David said, we're here to help. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. Thanks, and have a great day, everybody.